Funding for this program made possible by Toyota, Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky International Airport, Kentucky Center for Public Service Journalism, South Bank Partners, Kentucky Energy and Environment Cabinet.
The Licking River begins quietly in the mountains of Kentucky, poised to take its meandering path northward to join with the mighty Ohio. It is a living thing. This is its story, the story of the river that runs north and the amazing places it runs through.
A story is not just a simple story. There's always more to it. And if you're dealing with someplace like a river, life is everywhere. Not only natural life, but human life. And whether that's a person who runs a mill or somebody who fishes on weekends, this river is really alive.
When you're in the boat and you're going along the lake shore real quiet and late in the afternoon, you're liable to see just about anything. Nature is at its best out here.
Along its journey from a bubbling spring beneath a rock in southern Magallafin County to big waters at the big city of Cincinnati, this river runs through nearly every culture, geography, economy, environment, and society found in Kentucky. It is remarkable in the tales it can tell and the history it knows. Its winding waters reveal deep, slow-moving stretches, punctuated by shallow spots where banks narrow and the flow increases to riffles in a few small rapids. Over the course of a journey from beginning to end, the river drops more than 300 feet.
Well, it's a very varied landscape. You have the mountains in the foothills where it begins. And then there's a long expanse of relatively flat lands where we ended up here now. So among other things, the topography and the geology changes considerably.
Deer and muskrat, raccoons and turtles, blue herons, hawks, owls, and black bears inhabit its banks and fish its waters. Bald eagles are making a comeback, and, remarkably, the Licking is listed as a new hotspot for our national symbol.
Well, this river is kind of a unique place. It offers a lot of opportunities even before the European Americans came here. First, it was a great gathering place for animals because of the salt licks that were along its banks, and it was a natural habitat for a lot of animals. And of course, the animals would bring the humans. And when the humans came, the Indians, they had plenty to hunt for and plenty to live off of.
Native Americans didn't call it the Licking, they called it the Nephilim. The Licking River comes from the fact that ancient waters in aquifers below us now contain salt water. And so these salt licks would seep out along the banks of the river, and animals would come to the licks. So that's why we have Big Bone Lick, Blue Licks Battlefield State Park, Bank Lick, the Licking River. All these places are places where animals would come to get some salt. When Boone found it, of course, it was the domain of the Native Americans, and they basically used it as a hunting ground. It was not a place of permanent settlements. They'd come in, they'd hunt, and they would leave. And that, of course, was part of the tension between the Europeans and the natives. The Europeans said, I like this land, I'm going to put down my 40 acres, and they settled. And that's where the conflicts began.
You got to understand that Ohio and Kentucky were the lands of opportunity. This is where people would come to actually fulfill what we would now call as the American dream.
In terms of the licking itself, it's long been a passageway into Kentucky. We used to have a railroad that went along the bank. And so it was a way to get into Kentucky when ground transportation was more complicated and difficult. People could take a raft and relatively easily get quite a ways up the river.
Well, not only after that, of course, it was a big, powerful place for industry. Because you can imagine being able to move goods in and out of the interior of Kentucky so they could be put on flatboats and sent down the river. So the river changes.
Cave Run Lake, which was created when the Army Corps of Engineers built a dam across the Licking in the mid-60s, is where most people interact with the river. People in houseboats, sailboats, fishing boats aplenty are drawn to its beauty and its famous muskie. The Forest Service estimates that 320 to 350,000 people use one of its campgrounds around the lake between Memorial Day and Labor Day each year. And the muskie fishing is pretty terrific.
Well, we're at Cave Run Lake, and when we have big lakes, these are flood control reservoirs. They're typically up in the upper reaches of river systems. They're not down towards the mouth. Cave Run Dam is about 173 miles above the mouth of the Licking River. Well, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers builds reservoirs for flood protection, and this was built to protect the lower Licking Valley from seasonal flooding. It does get a lot of water in here at times, and the lake gets really, really high. When the lake was impounded, there were certain areas of the lake that were left, where the trees were left as is and not cut. Its seasonal pool or summer pool, the lake is 8,270 surface acres, and it is 48.1 miles long. A contrast of open water like we have here, big open water, and then the upper lake is narrow gorges with flooded timber, and the river channel itself in the extreme upper lake is like a flooded forest.
The nearby Minor E. Clark Fish Hatchery, operated by the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, is one of the largest hatcheries in the country. It provides muskie for the lake and other species of fish for waterways around the state.
Cave Run Lake is been known as a muskie lake since it opened 40 years ago. This section of the Licking River had been producing muskies for years and years and years. Well, the muskie is a long cylindrical fish. It has teeth. It's a real voracious predator, and this particular fish that's in the lake, a silver muskie, is a subspecies. Anglers come here, they have a wide variety of places to fish. They got the channel rock banks. We've got the deep hollows with timber, submerged timber. Then out here at Zilpo Flats is a prime example, a large, shallow flat covered by rooted aquatic vegetation, which creates an ecosystem. All the little fish, the minnows, the little fish go in there, and that draws the big fish, and it provides food and cover, and it's a wonderful thing. Well, yeah, without the Licking River, we wouldn't have this wonderful recreational showcase for this part of the state. It's a marvelous resource.
While fishing or camping at Cave Run may represent the best of the Licking, at the community of Sherburne in Fleming County, Carolyn Jones and her husband Lawrence have experienced the worst of it. Cave Run Dam has prevented tens of millions of dollars in flood damage along the Licking, but it hasn't helped Sherburne because much of the community sits in a particularly flood-prone area. There's big trouble when the river leaves its banks and shows up in the street outside the Jones Grocery, which it last did in May 2010, when the water stood over 7 feet deep inside the store. It has flooded so often that the walls and floors sag and some siding has rotted away. Little by little, the building keeps listing. The river's ravages took a toll in Sherburne generally over the years, leaving the once bustling town a mere shadow of its former self. A government buyout program was offered, but the Joneses turned down what they considered a low offer. Today, the store's shelves are mostly empty of groceries. Gas pumps are gone, and most of the store's business comes from a lunch crowd of farm workers and neighbors. Prices are right for a big, tasty country ham sandwich with a slice of homegrown tomato made by Mrs. Jones herself. Moving on, the Licking journeys past the Clay Wildlife Management Area, owned by the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. The wildlife area covers nearly 7,400 mostly forested acres where Nicholas, Bath, and Fleming counties meet. The stretch of river from the Clay Wildlife Area to Blue Licks Battlefield State Resort Park near Carlisle in Nicholas County is especially picturesque, and it brings history to the forefront.
Daniel Boone, a critical battle of the American Revolution, an immersion in living history at the park's Tanner Station, which illustrates life along the Licking in the 18th century.
Original settlements didn't transport water great distances. They didn't have any conveyances, so the water would come from the nearest stream or creek. Licking River certainly provided lots of settlements with their water supplies, and still does. The towns along the Licking River depend on the Licking River for their water supplies.
The Licking River is the place to go. It is the biggest, it is the most unique, it has the salt, it has the animals, it has ideal for settlement. So the Licking River was, stop A. This is where people wanted to be. And that's why the settlement created here was so fast and so thriving. This was what's almost like a stop on the highway. If you think of the Ohio River as a highway, the Licking River was a major port of call.
The history around the Licking and its impact on Kentucky is part of its special story.
The Licking is full of all kinds of surprises. Its historic importance is one. From its beginning in the coal fields, the Licking runs through forest and farmland, then flows through a dense urban area.
We are standing at one of the major intersections of American history. Quite literally, we are at about the midpoint of the Ohio River and its 980-mile journey from Pittsburgh all the way down to the Mississippi. That in and of itself is significant, but what makes it even more so is we're at the point. Historically known in Covington, Kentucky, this is where the Licking River behind us flows into the Ohio River after its 320-mile journey from the Appalachian Mountains in Magoffin County. the fantastic thing about all of this is this was the gateway to the West in the early 1800s. Not St. Louis yet, but right here in Cincinnati. And what developed very soon was across the river in Newport Barracks, which for about 90 years served as the United States Army's major Western arsenal. So men left here for the Mexican War, for the Civil War, and it lasted until the 1890s when finally the flooding was so great in the 1880s that they moved it to higher ground in Fort Thomas. Along this river, there was a lot of transportation with steamboats and many on both sides of the river. In both Newport and Covington, many industries developed. Those included some of the largest iron and steel manufacturing companies in the state of Kentucky, as well as some of the largest pork packing houses. And about 12 blocks up the river from here was one of the nation's largest pork packing establishments. What happened, however, is there were certain kind of natural impediments with this river behind us. Right here at the mouth of the Licking River with the Ohio, underwater there was a large limestone rock foundation under the river. Beginning in the 1880s and continuing on past the turn of the century, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers used dynamite to blast that rock out to make it more of a navigable channel. Today we know that they blasted probably over 30,000 cubic yards of rock out of that area. We know that already in the 1800s, people were tearing down trees right and left for use in lumber, firewood, etc. The deforestation was actually pretty significant by the 1840s. The deforestation does not help that fact. If you don't have enough vegetation and enough trees to hold back and help with the water table, what you're going to have is more flooding, and that happened from the 1880s all the way into the early 1900s, and of course the very big flood of 1937, which hits officially almost 80 feet in height.
Throughout most of its watershed, the watershed being that area that drains to a point, and the point in this case is right here at the point, the Licking River and the confluence with the Ohio, is that there aren't many sandstones except in the upland areas. So it quickly acquires a load of silt-sized particles, which makes the water very silty. Typically, if you look here, you'll see that the water coming in from the Licking makes a brown stain in the Ohio River that hugs the bank for quite a ways down.
Pollution levels are so high in the lower portion of the river, that would be the northernmost part approaching the Ohio River, that warnings are common each year that people should not swim in or have skin contact with the water. There also are submerged logs, gravel bars, fallen trees, and, along its entire length, too much trash. There are motor oil bottles, milk jugs, discarded appliances, broken coolers, and an abundance of plastic soft drink bottles. And there are tires. There's less trash in the river compared to 20 years ago, but still too much. Fecal coliform and E. coli bacteria are the top causes of the pollution.
I do a lot of research in water quality, and I've worked with the local sanitation district. And so I was looking at data that has been collected by the Licking River Watershed Watch, which is a nonprofit organization that does testing along the Licking River. And I used this data to look at water quality. I was looking at nitrate levels and dissolved oxygen and conductivity and fecal coliform to assess the overall health of the river over a course of several years.
So the research that we've done looking at past data on the Licking River, we saw that from the late 1990s to through the 2000s, we haven't seen a lot of change in the water quality. Overall, the water for the wildlife and the plants is pretty good quality. We have dissolved oxygen readings that are really good, meaning there's a lot of oxygen available for the organisms that live there. However, the bacteria or the E. coli readings are always very high, and that's more of a concern for human health, where in the data that we looked at, on average each year, the E. coli level was above the recommended level for swimming and having a lot of contact with that water.
Fecal coliform, an indicator of feces in the water, can come from cows standing in a stream, deer running through the woods, dogs living in a suburban neighborhood, geese congregating on a golf course, or from a faulty septic tank, or a straight pipe, which is illegal, that carries waste directly from a toilet to a stream. It can also come from an urban sewer system that dumps raw sewage in the river after heavy rains. The Licking Basin has all of those things and runs into some of the worst water quality when it reaches the urban sprawl of northern Kentucky. Northern Kentucky University's Center for Environmental Restoration is a nonprofit arm of NKU focusing on repairing and restoring some of the creeks that feed the Licking. Students do some of the work. The center is responsible for restoration in 9 northern Kentucky counties and has 3,300 acres under permanently protected conservation easement.
So at Northern Kentucky, we really value getting out in the community and doing service learning, and we've incorporated that into our classes a lot. With my Protecting Water Resource class, in 2 weeks we're actually going out to do a water cleanup with the Licking River Watershed Watch, where we're going to clean up part of 3 Mile Creek and get rid of the trash. So I think it's a great opportunity for any students or citizens to get involved, to look for those cleanup efforts, and to get outside and help make a difference. The most important thing for improving water quality in the Licking River is just informing the public and the landowners that live in the watershed. So being an informed citizen and knowing that the things you do to your land can affect the water quality for everyone downstream is important. All of those things add up, and so just being an informed, responsible citizen and playing a part in your watershed.
It was also really important to me as a community member, because it was a way for me to be able to understand what is going on with rivers in Kentucky and what the water quality looks like. And it allowed me to contribute to the efforts to clean them up, because the rivers are important to my community. Not only are they valuable ecosystems, but they're a source of recreation, and my community members, my friends, my family swim in them and play in them, and it's important that the water is clean.
In order for any big project to be successful, like the cleaning up of a river or making people aware of what they have, the assets the community has, you've got to share that idea with the public. And it's very important for the public to be involved. Successful projects, I don't care whether you're building the pyramids or you're building a dam or a canal, you need to have public input. You need to have those people aware that this is theirs, that this is something that they're responsible for. And there are so many groups that are interested in this area that work together and are very interested in our communities and our environment, which is very important. If you think about the rivers, the Ohio River, the Licking River, and some of the other rivers in the area as being our lifeblood, to be in the veins and arteries that keep us alive, they should be in the best shape possible. And so it's very important that that be done.
I'm a member of the Licking River Watershed Watch, which is a nonprofit organization of community members that live within the Licking Water watershed, along from eastern Kentucky, along the whole river up to northern Kentucky here. And it's those volunteers, they do it all by volunteer basis, that go out and actually gather samples to be tested. That's the data that we were actually able to work with. So if those individuals weren't volunteering their time and their efforts and writing grants to get the money to actually analyze the samples, if we didn't have that group, that work wouldn't be getting done.
Just teaching people, getting people to the water's edge is another important part of their mission. I think it's important that we recognize that the Licking River is improving, and it's improving dramatically in many ways. But as we understand, we as a group, as a country, understand better the effects of our actions. It's also putting a spotlight on some of the residual problems that we haven't fully addressed.
The one interesting thing about history is that we always think history happens someplace else. It's in Philadelphia, it's in Boston, it's in New York. But history is right here. Significant events in American history happened right here. One of the greatest defeats in American military history happened within 75 miles of where we're standing. What was America to become after the American Revolution was formed right here. It was these people and the influences and the things that were going on here that formed the Constitution. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787 forms the Constitution, and it's here. It's because the opportunities that were not anywhere else. There was land of opportunity. You could get here, you could become your own king. And this place had a great draw. Just standing here on the banks of the river, looking at the wonderful houses that are built around here that are very historic, and then looking at just a position of the modern buildings across the river. It's just like the Licking and the Ohio and this city itself, Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati, we're a dichotomy of different things, and I like that. And I think that's because of the river. I think the river, Licking River, is a great example of what it is and how it stays constant to a certain extent as things change. It is here, but its uses changes and our views of it change. But it's a wonderful consistency, and with history, there's so much life here. There's always life with rivers.